In this lesson, we'll learn how to make text fly on and off the screen. So to get started, we're going to go ahead and press the Create a New Composition button in the project panel. From here, we can go ahead and give our composition a name. I'm going to call it Fly In and Out. For the preset, let's go ahead and choose HDTV 1080 2997. This will give us a frame size of 1920 by 1080, frame rate of 30 frames a second, and under duration, let's go ahead and type in here 30 period, which will give us 30 seconds. Press tab and that commits that change. If you just type in 30 and press tab, you're going to get 30 frames, which is equivalent to 1 second. So we want to make sure we press 30 period and press tab. Down here in the background color, I'm going to go ahead and select this color, and instead of choosing a yellow color, I'm going to go ahead and go down to this black down here, maybe even a light gray if you like, it's up to you, and press OK. When you're done, press OK again, and you now have a brand new composition ready for your text. So now I can go up to my toolbar and select the horizontal type tool, and since this auto open panels is checked, my character panel flies open. I can go ahead and click on my composition here and type the word never. I'm going to select it by dragging over this text, and from the character panel I can change this font to something. I'm going to choose something kind of chunky, kind of fat without any serifs, and I have a font in here called Evogria. We'll go with that. This is an Adobe Fonts font. To make the font size larger, I can just drag this up here. If I want to change the color of this font, I can choose this fill color right here. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and choose, say, some white text and hit OK. I want caps. And right here, instead of typing caps, I can just push this all caps button, and that'll capitalize all my letters. In addition, I can go down to the paragraph panel, and I want to make sure that my text is set to center. This will make things easier as I add more text layers. Once I'm done, I can grab my selection tool and I can put this text wherever I like. If I change my mind on the font size, I can come back here and change things and tweak things to my liking. I want this to be centered inside my composition window, so I'm going to go over here to my Align panel, and I can choose this Align horizontally and Align vertically. And since my composition is selected here, it's going to center it smack dab in the middle. I'm ready to animate this now, so I'm going to go down to my timeline panel and I can whiz open my transform controls here. As projects get more busy, it can get very chaotic down here, and so it's nice to have some shortcuts. I can press the letter P just to get to the position, or A, anchor point, R, rotation, T, opacity, and S for scale. If I want multiple properties to work with, I can also hold my Shift key and press P, for example, or T, and now I'm just working with these three properties. In this example here, we're just going to be working with position, so I'm going to press P to just work with position. To turn on my animation, I can hit this stopwatch. And when I do, you'll see a keyframe is activated. I want to add 4 keyframes for this example. So to move and add a new keyframe, I need to move this current time indicator. And to do that, rather than just dragging it, I'm going to press my spacebar and estimate about half a second. So spacebar, spacebar. I got to 13 frames. That's almost half a second. That's good enough. I'll go ahead and add a new keyframe here. Now I'm going to add a second, 1000. So I'm tapping my spacebar. Spacebar starts my CTI moving, and spacebar ends my CTI movement. Add another keyframe, and then I'll add another half second here. Add another keyframe, and I have 4 keyframes. Now, if I cycle over these, you won't see any movement in this animation above because all these keyframes have the same X and Y value on the position. So in order to have animation, you have to have a change in time. In other words, the CTI has to be moving, and you have to have a change in space. And in this case, these values need to be different from each other's keyframe. So in this first keyframe, I'm going to drag this X value and I can move this to the left and right. And so to move it faster, I can hold my Shift key and it'll move much faster. So I'm going to drag this over to the left-hand side. And now if I press my spacebar, you'll see I have my first animation here. Now from this first keyframe to the second, I have movement. From the second to the third, it pauses so that someone can read this text and it doesn't just fly off the screen yet. But on this last keyframe, I want it to be on the far right-hand side. So to get there, I can move my playhead right over this CTI right over it, but a safer way so that we get right on top of this is to use these two little arrows down here. I can get before and after the next keyframe. If you like shortcuts, you can press your J key on the keyboard or your K key multiple times to get in between keyframes. So now that my CTI is right on top of this, I can move these numbers here. I can move this position again, or I can just take this text and I can drag it over here to the right. And since it's kind of going at an angle, I can also hold my shift key and that makes sure that it's level and off the screen. So if I play this back, I have this animation comes in and then it flies out. Now the timing might not be right, and so you can move these little keyframes around, and once you're satisfied with how this plays back, you can move on. In fact, what I like to do when I'm previewing one of my animations is I'll go just beyond the last keyframe and I'll press letter N. And what that does is it shortens this little bar here, which is called the work area. And so when I play this back now, it's just going to cycle between the work area. And if I want to make this longer, well, I can stretch this out, or I can double click on it to make it stretch to the entire composition length. But again, I'm going to come right to the end here and press letter N, like November, and I can cycle through this, sit back with my cup of coffee and say, is this what I really want? And I think it looks pretty good. One thing that can emulate real life is blur. And you see as this thing comes in, it's just kind of jittery as it flies off. And so if I was standing right in front of you right now and I was moving my hands back and forth and jumping around, there'd be a whole lot of blurry action going on because I'd be so fast. Well, you can do that with your text here too by turning on this little button. This enables motion blur. So I turn this on, but nothing happens yet. There's no blur. I have to turn on this little switch too. And by the way, if you turn this switch on and you still don't see it, perhaps you forgot to turn this one on. So I like to think of it like a building with its electrical system. This is the main disconnect outside. The building power has to be turned on. It's on. But the switches in the rooms also need to be turned on. So building power and bedroom lights, both of them are turned on and you have motion blur. Looks pretty good. The next thing we can do is we can add easing, which is also something that happens in real life. For example, let's say you're going to work and you park your car. You're going, 15 miles per hour in the parking lot, I hope, and then you kind of just ease in to your parking space. You slow down. And most things in reality work that way. In this case, we can add easing by selecting all of our keyframes, for example, and we can press F9 on your keyboard, and now you have an easing effect. And by the way, if you don't like shortcuts, you can also right-click after you've selected them, and you can go to Keyframe Assistant and choose Easy Ease. Notice the shortcut here. So if you were to look under the hood here, you could go to this graph editor and you'd see that this now has these nice little curves. Before, when I didn't have that, for example, let's say I highlight all of these keyframes and I press the Command key on my Mac or Control key on my PC, these turn into what are called linear keyframes. And if I go back to this graph editor, you'll see that these are just straight linear lines here. I like this easing, and you'll find this easing is very popular. It makes things look polished and it's really easy to add. Play this back. Looks pretty darn good. Remember, you still can come through here and adjust things however you'd like. The next step is to add additional layers, my additional text layers. So I'm going to come up to the top here on this work area bar. I'm going to double click so it extends all the way to the end of the composition. If I want to zoom in and out of this timeline down here, I have these little mountains down here that I can do that, but I can also just press my minus key on my keyboard. Make sure it's not in the numeric keypad, but rather on top of your keyboard. The plus and minus keys will let you zoom in and out really easily. So selecting my never text layer, I can press Control D on the PC or Command D on the Mac to duplicate these layers. So on my second layer here, I can double click and I can type in the word give. Now, I didn't even type these in caps, but you'll see that these will automatically be in caps because I have this all caps setting inside my character panel. On this top one, I'm going to say up. They're all stacked on top of each other, but I can see that the spelling is correct over here. Grabbing my selection tool up here in the toolbar, I can now come and stagger these layers. Now, if I want to see the keyframes in these other layers, I can select them and I can press letter P. The reason why these keyframes show up is because I duplicated this layer. And so what I can do is I can just kind of stagger these layers by selecting them individually. And when I play this back, let's see how this looks. Comes in, pushes it out, and we got it going on here. So I can go to the very end here and press the letter N, and then again I can sit back and say, how does this look? Looks pretty good. What's great about building out your animations this way is that first of all, it's fast, but it also looks consistent. And if you need to make changes, it's super easy to make. So for example, in this bottom one here, I'm going to double click. I'm going to change this word. I'm going to call this eat. And this one, I'm going to say live. And this last one, I'm going to say work. And so I just have 3 different words, and it was so easy to change them out. So if you're working on different projects, making those changes is really easy to update. So if I want to change the color, I could click on this color selection here, and maybe this text here is red. And so when I play that back, I have those different changes. One of the things that's important, because I am going to render this out, which means I'm going to output this file so I can use it, for example, inside of Premiere Pro as a title. I can take this work area and make it as long as I want it to be. I want to make it about 8 seconds long. And the reason why I add a few more seconds to the end here, in fact, feel free to add even more, is so that I can add transitions inside of Premiere Pro. Sometimes I'll even add a little bit of space at the beginning too, so that I can have a fade in Premiere Pro. Once I'm satisfied with this animation, I could continue to add more text layers, more animations, background images, videos, and so forth. Or I could export this to use inside of a Premiere Pro project. So let's do that. Let's go to File, Export, Add to Render Queue. From here, I'm going to leave all these default settings as they are, but I am going to click on this hot text here. Yours may say something a little different, but that's okay. Click on that there, and I'm going to name this Fly In and Out. Maybe I could even be a little more specific. And yours may be an AVI if you're on the PC, and that's fine for now. Choose Save, and when you're ready, press Render, and this file will be rendered to a flattened MOV or AVI file that can be used inside of Premiere Pro. I'm going to jump into Premiere Pro, and I'm going to go ahead and import that file. There it is. I can take this file and bring it into my timeline and play it back. I'm going to go ahead and trim it. Sometimes it takes a little bit of planning so that you make sure that your animations don't live longer than the video clip underneath it. I can't see the video clip, so I'm going to select this top layer, and I can go ahead and bring down the opacity a little bit. Maybe something like that. That looks pretty good. And I can play this back. And there we are.